this is not working for me tonight. Here we go. I absolutely love the Purity water bottle, both the Purity products, but the Purity water bottle especially is literally a constant companion of mine. And there we go. Finally got it. You'd think as much as I do this, I would get better at it, but I'm getting to that age now where I have to have my kids program all the electronics in the house for me. It doesn't seem to be getting any easier for me. So technology and me are not the best of friends sometimes. So anyway, this thing right here is my constant companion. And if you can see this on screen, this is probably the most scuffed, roughed up, disgusting looking Purity bottle that you'll ever see anybody carrying around. And that's because I've had this one for over a year. It's been around the world with me, literally around the world with me, everywhere. And I just can't seem to give it up and get a new one. So they are definitely rugged, I'll tell you that. So let's get into this. Let's get into Purity. Now, I'm going to start off with something a little sobering. And that is, while in the 6 or 7 minutes that we've been kind of messing around getting this all set up, hundreds of people around the world have died from water-related diseases, and many, many more are sick. Water-related diseases account for over half the hospital beds around the world. These are some facts from WHO, and they are very sobering facts. The fact that every 90 seconds a child dies from water-related diseases, and like I said, waterborne illness is an epidemic around the world. And what's interesting, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more tonight, when we talk about this, most people, when I ask people what they think about the stats like this, they start talking about places like Ethiopia or Uganda or India, or third world places where certainly there is a water problem. But what a lot of people don't realize is the problems that we have throughout developed countries, and how bad the water problems are. They're just not as noticeable and not as visible. But on top of all these problems, and primarily problems in the third world, this is actually just me. You gotta get some product shots in here and there. That bottom picture, by the way, is part of why my bottle is so scuffed up. I spent a couple weeks in Nepal with me last year. Was my lifesaver, literally my lifesaver there, and took a real beating. I want to look into this. This is just some things that I pulled not too long ago for last year. 2017 water advisories. In other words, water is unsafe to drink. The state of Washington, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, places in Canada, in the UK, throughout Europe. This list could go on and on and on. And it's interesting that right here in our own backyards, literally, we're having water problems. And these are sort of just the big cases. There are a lot of smaller cases where municipalities don't actually even report the water problems that they're having, or they find out after it's happened and something's flushed through the system and it's too late to even put out a water advisory. So this is a worldwide problem. And then there are other problems related to water that we'll get into. Other reasons why this water bottle and filter are so important and such an amazing thing to have in our product line. One of the things when we talk about water and water purity, almost all of us have been trained about is, and this industry has done a great job of leading us into this, is that we think bottled water is a safe alternative. And I will agree that it is a safer alternative in a lot of places, but it is not a safe alternative. The reason why is that the bottled water industry has pulled one of the biggest scams ever in the last 20 to 30 years. And if you look, I think on the previous slide I had Fiji water, which is one of the leading I kind of get a kick out of it every time I see their commercials, that it's bottled at the source and it's clean, and then there are all this beautiful music in the background and lush tropical foliage shown. The Fiji water plant is actually a horrible place to see in person, and looks about as industrial as anything you'd see in downtown Detroit or anything else. In fact, what was interesting is Fiji at one point had an advertisement, and they kind of made fun of Cleveland, Ohio, which is, like I said, Cleveland is a place that they're really proud that their river doesn't catch on fire anymore, and it's kind of that bad. But they were kind of bad mouthing Cleveland for some reason. I don't know even why they singled them out, but talked about how their water was so much, it's not Cleveland water. So Cleveland, the city of Cleveland, went and pulled Fiji water and their own municipal water and tested it, and found that Fiji bottled water was actually higher in several heavy metals, including arsenic, than their own contaminant, their own municipal water. So that was a real black eye for Fiji water, and that was something that happened a couple of years back. But all of the bottled water, really, again, they have convinced most people around the world that their product is safe and pure and clean. And it sure looks clean, it sure looks pure. And in most cases, it is nothing more than filtered tap water. Most of the companies put regular tap water through some sort of filtration, mostly to remove odor and taste chemicals, and then bottle it. And they're allowed to do that. The bottled water regulations allow them to do that, and listed as purified water. So the reality is that labs, and this is a number of labs publicly who have tested both tap and bottled water, have found over 20,000 different chemicals in bottled water. And this is a very varied list. Everything from microbial contaminants like bacteria and virus and protozoa to chemicals like pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, and then what we call emerging contaminants. And emerging contaminants, we'll talk about in a minute, why those are such a big deal and why those are a problem for us. But as I've kind of talked about, in some ways, bottled water is less regulated than city tap water, just because that filtration step allows them to label the product as purified or filtered water, and that's all they're required to label on there. And they're required to test for very, very few things. Most of that is some heavy metals and bacteria to a certain amount, but not a total kill. So, like I said, this is something that most people don't realize. People don't think twice about reaching for bottled water. Again, it tastes okay because most of the bad tasting and smelling things like chlorine have been taken out, but the other things that you can't see are still there. So the question is, and I'm going to skip this slide and we're going to come back to this. One of the other things about bottled water is the environmental footprint. So if you're somebody who cares about this, and I think we all should, it's amazing when you look at the process to make bottled water in these big plants. They actually have to go through 3 liters of feed water just to get 1 bottle of water. And then in all the packaging and transport and delivery and refrigeration and the whole supply chain from the plant to your corner store actually takes a 1/4 liter of oil in all of that transport and delivery. And that's not to mention all of the plastic that goes into it. So you end up with 3.5 bottles worth of material, water, and oil to give you that 1 liter of bottled water. And to me, that's not a real fair trade-off. And so there really has to be a better way. And so, of course, the Purity bottle and filter were designed to basically not only give you pure water, but also to help with this environmental problem. So we've done a lot of testing out there, a lot of independent testing as well against a lot of the leading bottles. And it's interesting, for me growing up here in Utah, I spent a lot of my life outdoors, hiking and fishing and camping and doing photography and a lot of things that I go out and do. So I have literally, I have like a shelf full of bottles. There's a local sports store here that's it's called REI, and every time I'm in REI and I have seen the latest water bottle and filter, I think, oh, great, maybe this is the one that will be great. It'll be convenient. And I never could find something that worked well, that didn't require a lot of maintenance, that had a good flow rate, all of these things that I was looking for in a bottle in the backcountry to keep me safe, and never could find anything. I literally have a shelf in the garage full of these things. And so I've always been interested in this and trying to find the perfect bottle. And so we ended up making the perfect bottle, and that sure saved me a lot in money at REI. Well, I mean, I spend it on other things, but not water filters anymore. But this is the table that is up on our X office, and you can refer to this. This is just a handful of sort of leading bottles. I've been asked about some others as well, and if you ever have questions or want a comparison, I can do that for you if you've got a specific bottle that you're looking for or have questions about. So just let me know on that. But there are some really cool things about the Purity bottle and how it was developed and why it works as well as it does. So now I'm going to kind of go back here. Sorry for jumping around here.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Just there was a question about the acronyms of those different tests. So I'm not sure if you come back to that chart or not, but like there was the EPA and the NSF something.
Yeah, I'll come back to that.
Great.
Great observation, and I sometimes forget that looks like alphabet soup sometimes. Why purity? So we're gonna talk about this. Why purity? First of all, the removal rates are truly market leading, and not only market leading, they're really just unlike anything else I've ever seen because it's what we call broad spectrum. So a lot of bottles out there are, this is one that probably a lot of people are familiar with, which is the Life Straw. And I'll tell you, the Life Straw has probably saved lives, and it really does work. But it only works for one thing. It really is made to remove bacteria and protozoa. That's where it stops. That's where it begins and ends. It's not effective against heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, emerging contaminants, all of these other things. But the Purity bottle, in its design and and the way it's put together, it is actually broad spectrum effective, which means bacterial effectivity, so bacteria, virus, and protozoa, chemical, everything from, like I said, heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, odor and taste, VOCs, all of these types of things, fluoride, all of these types of things, and then emerging contaminants. And we'll talk in a minute about what emerging contaminants are. The other things too is that in this, you still get convenience and portability. The fact that you're getting this kind of removal in a bottle that is both portable and requires almost no maintenance is amazing. And that's really the genius of the engineering here. It's portable, it's easy to carry, it's really rugged. Like I said, this has been with me for over a year with no problems. And then the fact that there's really no extensive wetting or back flushing or blowing out or anything else that has to be done with a lot of these hollow fiber products that get clogged, and so you have to do this back flush every so often. None of that's necessary with the Purity filter, and because it's got a built-in antimicrobial, you don't have to keep it wet or do any extensive drying techniques and then re-wetting. And then we talked about the environmental impact. So solving the plastic problem. I mean, we have just an enormous plastic problem in the world. They estimate that fewer than 40% of bottled water containers ever make it to a landfill. So where's the other 60% going? I think we've all seen shorelines of rivers and streams and lakes and the ocean, and most of it is making it into our waterways. A lot of it's being thrown along the side of trails, and that when I was in Nepal, they were talking about how bad the trail is, the Annapurna Trail, or I forgot what it is, there's a famous trail there, and then the trail up to Everest Base Camp is just littered with mountains of plastic now, from people who have just thrown, you know, their water bottles to the side, and how horrible that is to see. And so it is, you know, reducing the carbon footprint of bottled water and getting just making a dent even in the plastic problem, I think, is a good thing and a very responsible thing, and something that we're really proud of. So let's kind of move forward now. So, okay, so let me address this. There are, in the US particularly and internationally now, there are two standards for water testing. One is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency here in the US, and their standards actually now have been adopted in many, many other countries for water testing. The other is NSF, and NSF is a certifying agency, again, here in the US, but internationally recognized. And they both have very specific water testing criteria that you have to meet for removal, minimum removal of bacteria and virus, and that, to be able to make claims on your product. So there are two standards of NSF. One is 53 and the other is 42. They're long, they're boring, they're legalese. If you're ever having trouble sleeping, ask me for a copy, I'll let you read it, put you right to sleep. So there are actually very few water bottles that comply with both standards, and the Purity bottle is one of those. There are others, but not a lot. If I look at this chart, really, I think everything else is sort of self-explanatory, except for the technology. So let me talk for a second about the technology. So this, for example, is the Life Straw, or the Life Straw bottle, is a very good example of hollow fiber technology. And what hollow fiber means is it is a filter that's full. I don't think I can really show this too well on camera. It's basically very, very thin extruded fibers that the water has to pass through. So what happens is, if you have a molecule that is too big to pass through the fiber, it just gets stuck. It doesn't pass through. So things like, again, like bacteria and protozoa are too big to go through these fibers, and they get stuck, so they get filtered out. Well, the problem is you can only make a fiber so small, and in the Life Straw, I believe the size is 0.2 microns, which is perfect for filtering out most bacteria. There are some bacteria that are still small enough to get through, but not a whole lot, but there are some, and protozoa. However, virus are smaller than that, so virus pass right through. A lot of the elemental chemical elements basically pass right through. They're too small, and so if you're relying on hollow fiber microfiltration, you're relying on physical removal. There are a couple out there that use the technology that the Purity bottle does, which is electropositive attraction. And that way, regardless of the size of the molecule, it is actually pulled out and kind of attached and stuck to the media because of its charge. And a lot of the things that are removed in water have a very strong charge, and so they're very strongly attracted to the electropositive media because of their negative charge. In addition to that, there is a core in the Purity filter of zeolite and carbon, which further filters out some other physical contaminants. And so it's actually a two-phase system, and both of those together account for the reason it's such great broad spectrum removal. So you'll see a lot of different ways that people have attacked this, but really the electropositive attraction coupled with the carbon and zeolite have just given us amazing results. And you can kind of see the comparison on this chart. And like I said, this is available on the back office and in the library. So you can get your hands on this and study it more and share it. You're welcome to share this as well. The Purity bottle, like everything else we do at RX, we test independently. We don't want you to take our word for it. So this filter system was tested not only by the manufacturer, throughout development, but we picked two of the leading water quality test laboratories, one in US, BCS Laboratories down in Florida, and the other Maximum Laboratories up in Toronto, Canada. And they both independently tested the filter against a number of contaminants. They are both ISO accredited, International Standards Organization, meaning that they use very standardized and approved methodology for testing. And these are labs that specialize in environmental testing. And so these are the best of the best, and they both have given us the removal numbers that we rely on and the numbers that we publish. So there is a white paper, again, on the X office that summarizes this testing and summarizes the test results. And then we have summaries of the test results themselves. We don't release the entire test result because there's some proprietary information about the design of the filter in there, but the results have been summarized and those are available on the back office. So if any of you want to take a look at that or want to study that, or if you have further questions, you just contact me directly and we can talk about that. Okay, I am missing some slides for some reason. That's really strange. I'm actually missing the slides on emerging contaminants. So I just get to wing it, I guess, and tell you about emerging contaminants. So emerging contaminants, we're gonna come back here to here because I know they're at least listed. Emerging contaminants they get that name because they are contaminants that have been around but don't have a standard yet from EPA or other agencies. And they don't have regulatory limits from governments yet because they just don't know how to attack it yet. But these are things that are now in your bottled water, my bottled water, our tap water, our municipal water. And these are things like antibiotics and antidepressants and birth control and painkillers, narcotics, all of these things. And this is why I kind of say your drink has been spiked, without you knowing, because these are now the things that are of much bigger concern to a lot of people, because what they're doing is they're having behavioral ramifications. We're seeing now a lot of studies that are linking these emerging contaminants in the water to developmental problems, to fertility rates, to early onset puberty, to a lot of things that on a hormonal level are really kind of messing us all up. And that's because these chemicals and these trace elements are in our water. Most of us, when we take a prescription medication, our bodies only metabolize anywhere from 70 to 80%, if we're lucky, of that prescription medication. So the rest is actually flushed out into the sewer system and it goes through the treatment plants. But a lot of our municipal treatment plants are not set up to remove these types of things. In addition, when a lot of people get rid of their medication, although, we're all advised not to do this now, a lot of people just simply flush it down the toilet. And so all of that is making its way back into our water system. Some of it making it into the streams and lakes and oceans as well, which is having an environmental impact and an impact on marine wildlife. But eventually a lot of that's making its way back into us via the water we drink. And that's kind of a scary thought to me, at least. What I'm ingesting, what my children are ingesting, my daughters, and how is that potentially going to impact their fertility rates when they get older. Those types of things are the real, like I said, the emerging threat. And if you want, Google water and emerging contaminants when you have a chance, and you'll see just what an enormous problem this is becoming as more and more people realize what has made its way into our water systems. And cities and states and countries are scrambling to find ways of removing these things during the filtration process, but they're behind the eight ball, and they're a little late in getting there. I guess whatever they can do helps, but that's why this bottle and filter is so important, because these are things you will never see. They're colorless, they're odorless, they're there. And the way they build up over time in our systems is still to be seen, how bad of a problem that is, how deleterious that is to our health. But it's something that, like I said, is now being linked in a lot of ways to health problems. And that's something that, again, I get that sometimes it's difficult to point that out to people and to get them to understand the gravity of the situation. Because like I said, water, if it looks clear and it tastes okay, most people don't worry about it. Most people don't think anything of it beyond that. And so it is a little bit difficult, I understand, out there when you're carrying this thing around and people are curious and they say, well, why do you have that? And you say, well, because you can tell the story about pure water, and they say, well, I just drink bottled water. And that's about as far, like I said, as people go, because we've all in a way sort of been brainwashed into believing that that is clean and it's pure, and we just never give it a second thought. A lot of us don't, and that's too bad. Again, a filter, just kind of, I know there are always questions about this. The filter has been tested up above 100 gallons. The testing that was done at these laboratories was 100 gallons plus. We've also done other testing through a couple of universities to try to find the failure rate. It's gone up to at least 120 gallons before there's any slowing of the filter or the filtration. However, having said that, we still recommend that people replace this at between 50 and 70 gallons. For most people, because we don't drink enough water generally, most people, that takes about 2 to 3 months to get through. So if you're changing your filter every 3 months, that's probably adequate unless you're drinking a lot of water. And I hope you are. I mean, none of us drink enough water, probably. If you're drinking too much water, I'd be surprised. So it should last 2 to 3 months and still have 100% efficacy and 100% flow. We know that because we've doubled up the testing. Like I said, we've tried to find the failure rate, and most of these are still going strong after about 120 gallons. So we've tried to break it, and it's pretty tough to do that. The bottle itself can last you forever, literally. I have just tried to beat mine to death, and it's still going. So I'm trying to think. Like I said, I apologize. I'm missing a few slides here, and I'm trying to think of what was on those slides.
Hey, Tom, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Several people have inquired, and I'm curious about this one too. Any plans to create a filter that would go, either on the tap or refrigerators, that sort of a thing?
So we have prototypes already for a water pitcher. Here's the thing. It would be tempting just to design a Brita type water pitcher that this same filter drops into and call it good. And it would be a good filter. However, there are also other things you can do with a filter that doesn't require doesn't require a higher flow rate. So if you've got a filter like that's basically gravity fed and it's a drip filter, because of that different flow rate, you're able to do some additional things. So we're actually developing a special membrane filter with the same zeolite and carbon layers in it, that because of the slower flow rate, we actually get better removal rates of some key elements. And so that's kind of a cool thing. We're actually expecting a new prototype here in the next 2 to 3 weeks from our engineering team. And it's something that I couldn't put a timeline to, but it is very, very exciting, because we're getting a lot closer to that and getting very close to the mold of this bottle and the filter itself, and kind of know where we're going with it. So it still does have to go through all of the testing. We have to verify that it meets the standards. We have to make sure it can be mass produced at higher qualities with the same quantities at the same quality, all those types of things that from scale up of a prototype to production will take a little bit of time, but that is very seriously being looked at. There is also a project that the engineers are looking at for inline water filtration. That's a little more difficult because it's a higher flow rate. And so you've got to make sure you've got something that withstands the higher flow rate that you see in homes. So there are some different little quirks that have to be done there, but we are looking at both of those, as well as an attachment for a camelback type of water bladder, which I've actually tried the prototype. It works really well. I've got that in one of my backpacks. Phil Lewis has one in his, I think. And so a few of us are playing around with that, and that's something we do realize we want to extend this line. But we wanted to tackle the bottle first, just because that's the easiest and the most portable and the most sort of ubiquitous for everybody.
That's cool. That would be neat.
Great question. Yeah.
One more that is been asked, and several people went, "Oh yeah, good question." Is there anything that helps you know when you should replace the filter? Like life.
Like I said, we've kind of tried to break this, and we're seeing even above 100 gallons of use, there is no slowing of the flow. You know, that's one of the things with the hollow fiber technology. Eventually, all those fibers get clogged, and you just simply can't pull water through it. And it just stops working, which is always great to be out in the middle of nowhere and you really need water and realize your filter has just stopped working. That's always a nice surprise. But we have not seen that with ours. We're not seeing anything. Eventually, that filter, as it pulls things out, is going to become saturated. So we know there is a failure point. But that's why we've tested at least double the recommended shelf life of this thing. And so we know that if you are replacing it at 50, 60, 70 gallons, you are absolutely safe. You should know that you're still getting maximum flow and maximum effectivity of the removal. So
really it's going to be based on your experience with your own personal experience with the filter. You know how it flows. When all of a sudden it's really hard to pull water up that straw, then you probably need to replace your filter. Is that kind of?
I'll put it this way: if anybody has that problem and notices it starts to slow in the flow, I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to hear how long they've been using it and what their daily water consumption is, because we're trying to find that failure rate. We're still not there. And so, like I said, there are ways to test it, but it's not the most accurate just to keep flushing water through, but that's not a real world test. So if there's anybody out there, when you have a filter, if you've had it too long and you're lazy about replacing it or ordering a replacement and it does start to slow on you, I'd love to hear where that happened.
How long you've had it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
But great question. And especially because some people have experienced that in other water bottles where at some point you just can't suck anything through it. So I do know there are technologies where that happens quite a bit. So let's, I know there's a lot in the chat. I haven't really peeked at some of the questions, so maybe we can get to that at the end. So I just want to move on briefly to the Purity air filter. And then we can come back to questions about water, because I'm sure I see a whole bunch in chat. I'm sure there's some great questions in there. But I want all of you to take a second and take a deep breath. Whether you realize it or not, that's something that you do thousands of times every day, 20,000 plus times every day. You draw a lungful of air. And how many times do you stop and think about what you just drew into your lungs and into your bloodstream? Like water, it's something that we tend to take for granted. And yet what's interesting about the Purity line is this is the one brand that deals with what every single one of us absolutely needs every day. We need water and we need air for survival. We don't need cosmetics every day for survival. We don't need toothpaste every day for survival. Whatever the other brands are, we don't need weight loss. We need air and water for survival. And so that's why the Purity line, I think, is so fundamentally important and kind of so cool at the same time, why these fit into our if you remember, kind of our 360-degree view of health, because so many health problems are related to air and water. And air especially, again, just like water, has become a global problem. And we tend to think about, again, third world or highly polluted big cities and that. But air pollution has, at least in the US, become the fourth leading risk factor for death. No, that's actually not in the US. That's actually worldwide. I got my stats wrong here. That worldwide air pollution is now number 4, only behind, I believe, tobacco use. And so, you know, a lot of those deaths are with the immunocompromised, with the very young, the very old. But it affects all of us. And again, it's a very sobering fact, and it's kind of right here at the bottom of this infographic. 1 in 10 deaths worldwide is attributed to air pollution exposure. Well, that's great. You know, you go outside and you see the smog and the dirty air. And so what do we do? And it's funny because it happens here in Utah. Salt Lake is kind of in a bowl. I don't know, Melissa, if you've seen this in the last few times you've been here, if you've seen our inversion. Because we're between 2 mountain ranges and in a valley here, sometimes in the winter we get a really bad inversion, and it traps the pollution and the bad air in. We're kind of known for it. It's a dirty little secret here. But you know, you see that type of stuff and you think, well, I better go inside and get out of that. And we get these air advisories, and I know this happens in other places. London is one that top 5 now most polluted cities in the world, behind Mexico City and Beijing, is London. And there's a reason, I guess they call it the big smoke. And what's funny is they'll issue these advisories and basically tell people to stay indoors. And we get the same thing here in Salt Lake. I know that in other parts around the country and around the world, you get the same type of advisories. Well, I struggle to understand the logic of this, because what's interesting is all of these things that I'm going to kind of quickly go through some of these slides so that we stay on time. One of the things that's interesting about this is that 90% of our time is already spent indoors. And I don't know, maybe a lot of you have magic doors and windows, but I couldn't afford them in my house. I couldn't afford the windows and doors that keep all of the pollutants outside. So of course that mixes with the air inside. And what's even worse is actually there are added pollutants inside that are even worse than what we see outside. You know, auto exhaust and pollution, things like that. There are actually worse things inside our homes, believe it or not, that are more harmful to us. And in fact, the World Health Organization, WHO, actually claims that indoor air pollution is one of the greatest threats to human life. So you think of that stat of how many people die from air pollution, and you think that actually indoor air pollution is worse than outdoor air pollution. And that's a fairly established fact now. And the reason why is you look at what's in our homes. So not only do we have the outdoor air pollutants, these are the PM, which stands for particulate matter. So PM 2.5 means a particle that's 2.5 microns in size. PM 10 is something that's 10 microns in size. I'll give you an illustration here in a second about how small those things are. But you add to that volatile organic compounds. This is everything from cleaners to air fresheners to scented candles, all of these things inside that give off VOCs. A lot of us have mold in our homes. Bacteria, certainly pet dander, dead skin, dust, smoke, you know, all of the chemicals that are used in the house. If you ever get a new sofa or mattress or carpet and you get that, you know, new carpet smell or whatever, that's volatile organic compounds. Those are chemicals that are off-gassing. So all of these things add to the PM 2.5s and the PM 10s that are outdoors that find their way in, because again, we don't have magic doors and windows that keep all that stuff outside and never let it pass the threshold. It makes its way in. Indoor air is the same as outdoor air. It just looks a little cleaner. Most of us tend to not have smog in our houses, I'm guessing, but it's still there. Those small particles are there. And the reason we don't see that is because they are so small. And just for comparison, I'm going to just kind of skip ahead here. You look at a human hair. A human hair is typically 70 microns in diameter. A grain of sand is 90 microns. So you look at these things in comparison. So PM10, which is one of the bigger particulate matter, a lot of smog is made up of PM10s, a lot of car exhaust and those types of things. It's, it's 1/7 the diameter of a human hair. PM2.5 is even smaller than this. So these are things that are in our air. They're all over around us, and we don't see it, we don't smell it, we don't realize it's there. I actually have a PM2.5 meter in my office at work, and it's amazing how often it goes off, or I see the levels climb for no apparent reason. And it's usually it's kind of alarming. And I actually have one of these in my office, so I usually crank it up on high when that happens. So the air filter has been certified and tested to remove 99.99% of air pollutants. So 4-log reduction of all these air pollutants. And the way it does this, again, we've kind of used the same technologies we do in the water bottle, which is broad spectrum removal. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just hitting large particles or small particles or odor contaminants. There are a lot of air filters out on the market that do part of this, and that's what they focus on. They do it very well, but they miss part of it. And so this is actually a 3-stage filter. So we actually have a pre-filter, which is good for large particulate matter, dust and hair and pollen and those types of things that are fairly large relatively. Then we have a 7-stage main filter, and I'll go into this in a little more detail, for the small particulates, VOCs, odor. And then we have an ionizer, which charges the remaining particles that didn't get filtered out. What happens then is those attract to each other, and then as they're recycled through the filter again, they're easier for the filter to pick up. So the ionizer is actually a really nice last stage to clump all those negatively charged the particles, so they clump together, and as they pass through the filter again, they're trapped. So this pre-filter, again, this is made up of 3 different materials in smaller and smaller diameters. So they get rid of the dander, the hair, and the lint, and the pollen, and those types of things. There are a lot of filters on the market that do this. This is kind of where they stop, but they get rid of the larger filters, and that's great. And if you ever want to see something scary, put this in your home for a month or 2, and then wash out this pre-filter, and you look at just the large stuff that you're breathing. And most of us are a little scared, a little disgusted. I know I was the first time I put one of these in my house, just in the main living area, and I thought, that's what I'm breathing every day, and that's kind of gross. And it made me want to go buy a better vacuum and dust a little more often. And so now I make my children vacuum and dust more often. So, but this is a great pre-filter. It is washable, it's removable, and it's something that you can keep as clean and wash it as many times as you want. Again, it's the larger size particles. Now we get down into this smaller one, and this is actually 7 stages, 7 different types of media that are put together here. And this is what you see in others that advertise that they are HEPA filters, or high efficiency particulate filters. This is that stage. And so we've now added the good pre-filter with HEPA filters and a number of other diffusers and carbon filters that do now a number of things. They'll remove the odors, the ammonia, the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds. Again, the particles down beyond 2.5, gases, fumes, and odors. We have actually a lot of like nail salons and things that have started using these filters to get rid of some of those fumes and odors that build up there. This is not just for your home. We have a lot of people who use this in the office and actually whole office buildings, dental offices and medical offices, and a lot that have put this filter in there just because of the number of different chemicals that they're using. And then, you know, a lot of, again, very dangerous VOCs, the sulfides and the benzenes and toluenes and formaldehyde and all these different things are trapped in the zeolite, which again is part of the water filter. Zeolite is amazing. If you remember when we talked about the Restorix and how we use it in that product and what it does, and because of its cage structure, how it pulls things in and traps them in. Zeolite's kind of an amazing material, natural material. And how many things it traps inside of it is really kind of cool. And then beyond this stage 10, like I said, we have the ionizer, which does kind of collect these other molecules, negatively charge them, they clump together, and then as they pass through, as the air recirculates again through, the filter picks them up even easier on the next pass. So it's a very complicated filter when you kind of break it apart and realize how many different layers and different types of media there are. But the cool thing is that this is now put into a very high efficiency filter. So with all of these stages, you're still able to pull air through very quickly. It cleans above 300 cubic feet per minute. So in a typical bedroom, for example, you're probably getting 5 air passes per hour, 5 complete air turns of the air in that room. In a larger room, like a living room or something like that, you're probably getting on average about 2 to 3. And then of course, it just depends on how open that area is and how much air movement there is. So the numbers do differ, but in the controlled tests, it's above 300 cubic feet per minute, which is actually a very good airflow. It's still very quiet, fairly quiet motor compared to a lot of other filters on the market. And again, very broad spectrum removal. And again, all the safety testing has been done, all the electrical testing, CE marked in Europe, UL testing for North America, US and Canada, all the testing for Japan, Taiwan, China, Australia. Very, very good performance testing that we've done. You see kind of a list there of all the things we've certified, the removal. Again, these reports are available in the back office. A lot of this testing has been done worldwide from China, where this is a really big deal because the air pollution is so bad, to Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, US. This testing has been done a number of places to measure, again, the removal of 2.5s, PM10s, bacteria, mold, benzoene, toluene. The list is pretty extensive. And so it really is, it's interesting. This really is a very industrial type of unit when it comes to the strength and the power and what it does. And something that, you know, if you put this in your home, most people are surprised at how quickly they notice the change in their air. People with allergies and asthma and things like that, that need better air, need pure air, often notice within days the change. I know I certainly did. I have some pretty bad seasonal allergy problems. And so, you know, this time of year, mine is pretty much cranked on high 24/7. And I have noticed a difference in my own home and my own air. So again, with everything else on these trainings, I struggle to keep these things to an hour, and I kind of struggle to. I just want to. I kind of want to geek out over this stuff, and I want to just go into all the technical details, and I know it just sounds way too nerdy, and it gets boring that way, but. Hopefully we'll have a lot more chances to go in depth and have a lot more training. And there are a number of videos and other things on the back office that go into a little bit more depth and a little more technical detail. And if you ever want to talk that tech with me, let me know, send me an email. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute and I'll come back so I can see all your faces and make sure you're all still awake. And I'm gonna sneak into chat here and see if there are any questions that
Yeah, that was a great presentation. I think some of the most recent ones I saw were about it's just so how large the unit, but then someone posted the size. When would these maybe be available in North America? Any idea?
Well, they are available in North America now. I'm not sure, to be honest, on the air filter in Mexico. That may still be outstanding. But one of the reasons we moved this training ahead of some of the other brands right now is because, and I don't want to steal any thunder, Melissa, I didn't know if this is well known that this is going to be available next week. Do you want me to say anything?
You're talking about the water bottle?
Yeah, the water bottle.
Well, yeah, most of Canada's got it now. They got it in a great little pack with Slenderize and with and US and Australia's got the water bottle with 2 filters that we just started last week.
Okay,
so,
good.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure when that was being turned on, but I knew that you were talking about it in your event in Brisbane and Melbourne next week. So that's why we the suggestion was made to me that we kind of move this up, and I thought it was a great suggestion to talk about this before your event in Brisbane and Melbourne, and make sure that people were aware of it and being aware that it is now available down in Australia as well. So. So those of you Aussies on the call, this is now the first of the RX products to go OTG in Australia. So that's kind of exciting to all of us because you've pushed for all of the products down there as quick as possible. So you, I love your tenacity down there. You guys are amazing. There was a question here actually. That was interesting. Will the air filter diffuse aromatherapy scents? We actually, when we first developed this, had an essential oil diffuser that was made to fit onto the back, the output. We never ended up going through with that design, but it actually does work very well. So if you have essential oils that you like to diffuse, you can put them near this. Just make sure they don't go into the intake and get diffused right or pulled right out, but just as the at the exit or somewhere near this, they do diffuse really well. I actually have a lot of people who will do something like they'll put the diffuser at one end of the room and the air filter at the other end of the room, and that way they make sure they're not just pulling the essential oils right back outside or right back out of the air. The filter, again, changes of the filter. The filters are designed to last a year. That's in typical use. So depending on where it is and how polluted the area is, that may happen a little sooner, but they are actually designed typically for 1 year use.
1 year use?
Yeah. So let me just flip through back to maybe the water questions. Really good question here. So if you're going into an area where there's a water boil advisory, can you use Purity? The answer is yes, because most of those boil advisories are because of a bacteria. Most often those boil advisories are because of a bacterial problem. And this is, again, extremely good microbial removal. I could geek out. I could get into logarithmic removal rates and what all the nines mean, but it's for bacteria, it's 99.9999% removal, which is 6 log reductions. And every single one of those nines represents another 10-fold reduction. So that's basically, if you started off with 1 million and have a 6 log reduction, you're going to end up with 1. So basically that's what that means. On virus, again, you're getting 4 log reduction, 99.95 on that, and on protozoa, 99.997. So incredible, again, market leading removal rates in this filter. And so those areas where there is a boil advisory, a lot of people have used this, bought these filters for, emergency preparedness kits and, things like that. There's probably somebody with a bomb storage, a bomb shelter, in their backyard somewhere that's stocked with Purity bottles. I wouldn't be surprised. But
we need those for our Houston Hurricanes. That's for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
probably. Yeah. We actually sent a lot of these bottles down after the hurricane in Houston, donated a lot of these bottles down there and a lot to Florida as well, just for people. Obviously not enough. There were, I mean, the impact down there was huge, but we did send a number of these down, which was kind of cool. I was happy to see that. But yeah, you know, I mean, we hear Flint, Michigan, the best or the worst, I should say, example of a bad municipal water system. And you know, I personally, you know, I would tell you, I'd have no problem drinking Flint water out of this bottle. I've done it, like I said, I've done this in Kathmandu, in Beijing, in you know, in places throughout Southeast Asia, in Mexico City, places where you are very specifically told not to drink the water, and have never had a problem. So just an amazing, life-saving bottle, really. And I've got a lot of friends, reps as well, who have taken this to Africa and a number of other places. This really has sort of taken its licks worldwide in some pretty crazy places. I also use this a lot in the backcountry and here in the West, and in Utah specifically, a lot of protozoa giardia problems in the backcountry in high lakes and streams, and again have never had a problem with that. I've gotten very, very sick in the past, thinking that stream water was okay to drink, but again, it's amazing. I really tell people that you can drink out of any water source. Now, of course, it does not desalinate water, so seawater is out. It's not meant to do that, and not designed to do that. Trust me, if this bottle did pull out salt from seawater, we'd all be gazillionaires.
Ooh, yeah.
But that's still the holy grail, and someday somebody will figure that out. But it really any other water source. Now, I don't know if I'd, you know, drink out of a pond where there was a dead buffalo, you know, 5 feet upstream. I don't know if I'd take that chance, but
well, give it a try and let us know how it goes.
Or how about you give it a try?
Yeah.
You know,
I'll keep you posted.
There's a question on whether it is dishwasher safe. It is. Yeah, just remove the filter, but the bottle and lid and everything else is dishwasher safe. So that there is another question. We do have a stainless steel version. I don't know when that's going to be available in each market. It is available now, but the quantities are a little bit limited. We've kind of done that as a promo. It's a really good, rugged stainless steel bottle, insulated, keeps things warm and cold. But it is, yeah, so that one is there as well, and probably will be available, maybe not full time, but if you're interested in that, just watch for that. That'll be available from time to time. Fluoride. Oh, I knew there would be a question about fluoride. Let me take just a minute and talk about fluoride in this bottle. Fluoride is very interesting. I refer to fluoride as like your desperate friend. Okay, so I'll explain why. Fluoride is actually not one single element. Fluorine actually combines with a number of other elements on the periodic chart. And what's interesting is fluorine is actually the most electronegative element of any element on the periodic chart. And what that means is it really, really hates to be alone. It really wants to combine with something. So again, it's very much like that desperate friend at the end of the night at the bar or the club who just wants to hook up with anybody, right? Doesn't want to go home alone. Just doesn't even care at that point who it is. It's just like, I don't want to be alone. I'm going to hook up with anybody I can find. That is fluorine. And my apologies. We all have that friend, right? We know who it is, but just can't stand to be alone and doesn't want to leave at the end of the night by themselves. So fluorine really very strongly bonds to these other elements. And once that happens, it's extremely hard to remove because it's very, very water soluble. So there are really only two ways to completely pull fluorine out of your water. One is reverse osmosis, and the other is distillation. And those are very, very good technologies. The problem is they're not small-scale portable technologies. So you're not gonna carry around your RO unit or your distillation unit in a water bottle. So this filter, for what it is, which is a portable filter with a high flow rate, actually is one of the best fluoride removal rates of anything I've ever seen. It's about 50%. So it does not pull all the fluoride out, but for this type of portable unit versus RO or distillation, that is actually an amazing feat to get that much fluoride out with that filter. Like I said, those two filters are great. You know, those are usually under the sink or countertop type larger units, and those are really the only way to completely get rid of fluoride because it is so water soluble. It's so hard to get out of your water. We would love to get a higher removal rate, but like I said, that for a portable water system is actually quite fantastic. Now, the modified filter that we're doing for the water pitcher for your fridge or countertop actually has a much better rate because it's a slower removal process, and you get, because of that slower process time through the filter, we're able to filter out a lot more fluoride. And we haven't seen the final numbers of that, but that will probably be almost complete removal. Like I said, cool. So it is. We are really excited by the preliminary numbers we're seeing there. Almost as good as distillation is what we're seeing right now. But I know it's a question because it's a big concern to a lot of people, and it is, when you look at everything else that this pulls out, and it also effectively reduces fluoride. I don't want to say remove, but really the term with fluoride is that it reduces it quite a bit. So that's something we're all very cognizant of. We would love to get higher flow rates, and if there's ever an advance in this type of media for this size product, you know, we'll see if we can make that upgrade because that is something we want to pull out. I think a lot of the questions hopefully were either addressed here or
yeah, I think you did a great.
Kind of went out. Giardia, yeah, question about that. Yes, 99.997% removal of Giardia. Yeah, I'm just kind of skimming through here. Hopefully I got about everything, and hopefully this, like these other training sessions, is useful. I appreciate some of you. Now like I said, I'm recognizing week to week, so you're coming back. I guess that's a good sign. Either that, or you have nothing else to do on a Thursday night. So I'm guessing it's because you're actually learning something, which makes me feel good that I'm actually able to pass on a little bit of knowledge without boring you all to death. So I do appreciate you taking time this week. As with every other week, I guess we'll return to our normal schedule next week.